Hi, my name is Dick Swanson. I would like to thank Daniel Linkett for the kind invitation to speak at this wonderful event. It is a great honor and privilege. I've had the fortune of having had a front row seat for watching the development of our field over the last 50 years and would like to share some thoughts from this journey. I will try to keep it short. Having now had the assignment to reflect on Edmund Becquerel, it seemed to me that one can divide our PV journey into distinct phases. The first phase is a period from the demonstration of the photovoltaic effect until the development of the first practical solar cell at Bell Laboratories in 1954. This period was characterized by the discovery and development of the underlying physics. It's hard to put ourselves in Becquerel's shoes, but at the time of his discovery, the first instrument for measuring electric current was less than 20 years old. Very little was known about electricity. In fact, the conservation of energy was a matter of controversy and exploration. He could not have even posited an efficiency because electrical units had not been well formulated. But he clearly noticed that light could cause electrical effects. This was revolutionary. It would take over 100 years of effort by many physicists to progress the field to where there was a basic understanding of what was going on. Electromagnetics, thermodynamics, quantum mechanics, solid-state theory, these were all needed to make sense of the observations. This culminated in the invention of the silicon solar cell. By then it was clear how the device actually worked, because semiconductor theory had been developed just in time. Phase 2 was involved in making solar cells the nearly universal power source for space vehicles. I got involved in 1973 at the time of the first oil crisis. At that time, the established workers were all involved in space cell development. But a few intrepid ones began thinking about how to make solar cells cost-effective for use down here on Earth. Even a more intrepid few started the first terrestrial solar cell companies. These were Bill Yerkes, Elliot Berman, and Peter Varadi. In fact, in Japan, Sharp was already making solar cells for some specialized applications down here on Earth. Phase 3 is where I became involved. I'll talk a little about that period. You'll have to wait till the end to see what I think phases 4 and phases 5 are. In order to appreciate what Becquerel started 181 years ago at the age of 19, I thought it would be kind of fun to repeat his experiment. I couldn't do this exactly because I didn't have the needed chemicals in my kitchen. But fortified with the intervening years of improved understanding, we can do something very similar. First, we need to make an absorber. I used some copper laying around. Heating it formed what we now know as a semiconductor, copper oxide in this case. Next, we need the electrolyte. Becquerel's cell was an electrolyte cell. Some people are still working on electrolyte cells. I used a wine glass as the module housing in honor of the country where Becquerel was born. Finally, we assemble the module and test. We do have an unfair advantage, perhaps, in that our electrical measurement technology has improved greatly, as exemplified here by the Fluke digital voltmeter. It works. Amazing. Here are the test results. You can see the open circuit voltage, the short circuit current, fill factor, data of a resistor, the power output, and the efficiency, which I compute as 0.0024%. Well, we've enjoyed a 10,000-fold improvement today, so certainly that's something to cheer. In fact, if you compute it out, it's about a 5% annual relative improvement in efficiency. Back to my story. I decided to switch from microelectronics to PV at the time of the first oil crisis in 1973 and joined the Stanford University faculty. At that time, space cells cost around $200 a watt, It was deemed by most that silicon solar cells were not capable of sufficient cost reduction to compete with terrestrial power plants. Two main approaches were proposed, therefore, to bypass this problem: thin film cells and concentrators. We chose concentrators. This particular slide shows my Stanford research group visiting an early concentrator test site at the PG&E facility in San Ramon. This concentrator was made by Martin Marietta Corporation. We had developed record silicon solar cells at Stanford and decided to form a company in 1985 to commercialize them. It took 5 years to raise the money. Here we are after doing so. Photovoltaics was not a popular item among VCs at the time, as you might imagine. Several of our founding members are very active in the community today. Here's Pierre Verlinden, who is also speaking at this event, and Ron Sinton, who you may know. Our first product was a 500X concentrator cell for solar systems dishes in Australia. We got some experience, however, making one-sun solar cells when Honda asked us to make our high-efficiency cells to power their solar-powered race car, the Honda Dream, across Australia. The car won the race by over a day over the second car, and so this gave SunPower some nice exposure, of course. We used that experience to power the autonomous flight vehicle Helios to a record altitude, 100,000 feet in this case. It's higher than any non-rocket powered airplane has ever flown. Some people today still use SunPower solar cells when they need the very highest efficiency. Efficiency has sort of been SunPower's main thread throughout the years. This picture shows Solar Impulse, which was on a solar-powered flight around the world, approaching San Francisco. We had a welcoming event for the pilots, Bertrand Piccard and André Borschberg, in San Francisco. Bertrand gave a very inspirational speech on how if you can fly an airplane on the sunlight around the world, you can clearly do anything to power the planet with sunlight. He's quite a speaker. That's me introducing him there from the podium. Next big event was when SunPower went public. In 2005, we raised funds to greatly expand our manufacturing capacity. Certainly a seminal event in SunPower's history. After acquiring Powerlight, Powerlight was the largest system integrator at that time. We were involved in all three of the main market segments for photovoltaics. This picture shows commercial rooftops array powering the Microsoft's Silicon Valley campus. This picture shows a power plant that we built fairly early on in Spain, 165 megawatts. SunPower's original business plan was to target the power plant market with concentrator systems. That market never materialized. But finally, it started to blossom, and it was with the flat plate cells, as you know. We're also involved in the residential roof market. So that brings us to the present, and I think you've all heard the constant drone from the media about how cheap PV has gotten. Here's a couple of examples. Clean energy is about to become cheaper than coal. And there have been many such proclamations coming forth. And so I think you would be forgiven if you felt that we had won. We had basically done what we set out to do, which was make PV as cheap as conventional power. What I'm here to tell you is that's actually not the case. It's not even close. We've got some big problems. We have daily and seasonal variability of the solar insolation. In utility speak, our source is non-dispatchable. And we also have to confront the fact that CO2 emissions have not yet started going down. That's, of course, because only a very small percentage of the world's energy yet comes from solar and PV. Well, I think the real issue that we're facing right now is simply to stop global warming. Given the prevalence of natural gas and the low cost of it and the huge supply that we are sitting on top of, in fact, pretty much the only reason to pursue PV is to reduce CO2 emissions. Many studies have looked at this, of course. This shows results of several that have been combined, which display the amount of CO2 emission reductions from the peak, roughly now, to that which would be needed to prevent us from basically frying the planet. And you can see that the overall emissions has to basically zero out by the end of this century. However, the electricity sector, which is the easiest portion of the emissions source to control, needs to be zeroed out by 2050. This is actually only 30 years from now. So that's our target for those of us in the community, to drive the electricity generated CO2 emissions to zero in the next 30 years. Some places are sort of trying to get a jump start on this. For example, California has a approved bill that would give us a goal of 100% reduction by 2045. So I think things are changing in our field, and we are in phase 3. Has been the sort of center ring of our field for the last 50 years or so. The goal of that was to make renewables cost effective. We're now moving on to phase 4, which I sort of proclaim to be starting today. That 30-year phase is we are charged with eliminating greenhouse gas emissions in the electricity sector. Phase 5 is the more difficult problem of eliminating greenhouse gases everywhere else. This is going to be an absolutely mammoth job. I think that people entering the field today are in for a heroic adventure, one that was only teed up by those of us who worked in phase 3. How do we go from several percent of clean energy production through PV to at least 80% PV production, which is comparable to the number that will be needed to drive the electricity generated CO2 to zero? So the question kind of comes up is, what are the things that need to be done during this phase? There are many tasks that can be posited. I've sort of grouped them together here in categories. If you're if you're new to the field today, depending on what you're bringing to the party, your skill set, you can choose the area that works best for you. But in the technology area, of course, we will need to see incremental cost reduction in modules and balance of systems. it's very misleading to say that we compete on a cost-wise basis with fossil fuels today, because in fact the sun doesn't shine at night. And the result of that is that in any conceivable future scenario, much of our PV generating capacity will be curtailed. It will have more energy than we can use on the sunny days in the summer. So in order that the average cost of the energy decrease, we still need to continue reducing the cost of modules and balance the system. We'll need higher efficiencies in order to do that. An important thing will be perhaps to generate a 50-year module lifetime so that the panels can be amortized over a longer period of time, and we'll be generating less landfill. One area that I think is going to be important is a renewed emphasis on building integrated PV as we search for more and more spots where we can put photovoltaics. The manufacturing challenges are huge. We have to enable a massive scale up in our manufacturing capacity. The difficulty of this should not be underestimated. And of course, we need to develop storage. We need to develop low-cost, effective, long-term electric storage technology. And this has now become one of the central focuses of the investment community and the academic community. How in the world do we make storage, which will need something on the order of 200 hours probably for an optimal electric system, cheap enough. We need to develop ways to deal with the high penetration of PV into our electric grid. It's already at the current penetration levels causing some issues for utilities. When we get to 80% PV, it's a completely different paradigm, and it will require completely different methods to deal with it, from demand-side management to increased transmission, microgrids, all the rest that you read about. And policy will have to develop copaesthetically with that over time and permit these changes to take place in a smooth manner. One area that clearly needs to be rethought, especially in the United States, is the classic business model of a regulated monopoly. So you can see that there's a lot to be done. I think it's going to be a very exciting period, and one in which I wish I were a young person starting out today, that is going to be very much rewarding for those that get involved. Over the years, I've gotten to know and work with a large number of people in this field. It's one of the things that drew me into photovoltaics at the start, as I switched from microelectronics, was the nature of the community, just full of enthusiastic, long-term thinking, brilliant individuals who were a pleasure to work with and who helped make Phase 3 happen. Many of these people I have listed on this slide. Those with the yellow are no longer with us. This slide also does not include the many people who brought policy and manufacturing skills to the task and who are equally important in our success. A big thank you to you all. The first person in PV that I met was Gerald Pearson, who was the co-inventor of the silicon PV cell and who had his office near mine at Stanford. He had moved to gallium arsenide cells at the time, but I had the honor and privilege of having Roger van Overstraeten, Adolf Getzberger, and Pierre Baruch all do sabbaticals in my lab at Stanford. That was really inspirational and fun. Most of my PhD students went into microelectronics, as there were few PV jobs at the time. But one of the things I'm most proud of is that of my 4 students and postdocs who did go into PV, they have contributed greatly and been widely recognized in the field. Those are Pierre Verlinden, who's speaking at this event, Ron Sinton, Richard King, and Andres Cuevas. What a wonderful journey it's been working with all of you, and thank you very much.